We have seen how our complacency over the years, and I want to call it that, has placed us in situations of vulnerability, even fatal vulnerability.
Yo, what's up? Welcome back to yet another video. Today we are talking about the African Union. I've made I think 3 videos talking about how useless and toothless the African Union is, and I still stand by those statements. I just think that the African Union is just like a club. We need to reform the African Union. We need to reform it so it includes all the good things that are supposed to benefit Africans. But in that note, I think Donald Trump is good. Obviously, he's doing things to, I guess, show his colors, but I think African leaders are taking note and they can use this opportunity to free themselves from the chains of aid.
Are witnessing the rise of nationalism, protectionism, the pursuit of narrow interests, and the decline of common cause. This is the world that we, as South Africa, a developing economy, must now navigate. But we are not daunted to navigate our path through this world that constantly changes. We will not be deterred. We are, as South Africans, a resilient people, and we will not be bullied.
The president of Botswana did a really good example about this, making sure that his key points I liked were about health sector in the entire continent, because if you know the US aid was usually was just targeted at helping many African countries to tackle health issues, be it sexually transmitted diseases and HIV and AIDS and all that, and maybe the pandemic as well, like COVID-19 and Ebola, all those other things that sometimes are threatening to African lives. So the US aid was mainly involved in that.
We are now at the mercy of external powers on account of our over-reliance on aid coming from the developed world. We need to move away from this, and as we do, we need also to ensure that in the future, any change that must be effected is not dependent on or driven by or triggered by crisis. Because these crises, as we learned, sound in human lives and livelihoods. We need to mobilize, as President Kagame urges upon us, domestic finance for our health care. We need, in the process of so doing, to avoid falling into the trap wherein governments pride themselves in the universal provision of standardized, low-quality goods and services.
And Donald Trump has signed that no more aid to African countries except for Egypt, and who knows the reason, right? So I think it's time for African countries to stand up. I know I say this because to some extent, personally, I don't get affected, but I know people that are close to me that might get affected by all this, like be it losing jobs or help from these institutions that were supported by the US aid. But I think the African governments or countries are able to fill in those gaps. Obviously, there were no budgets dedicated to doing those things because the US aid was filling in that gap. But I think that African countries can afford to at least remedy that space that the USAID is leaving, and hopefully they will be able to also, I guess, take in the people that might have lost jobs because they were working with the organization that were working hand in hand with the USAID. So I think African countries are capable of doing that, and I think what Juma Boko's points are is that we should be able to be independent enough that we don't wait for the pandemic to hit. We should be able to develop our own vaccines or do our own research and make sure that we are protected from the pandemic before it happens so that we don't scramble after the pandemic is hit and we don't know where to go, what to do, and all that. So, and I think that one thing that we can commend African countries for doing was how they handled the pandemic, because I remember a lot of people were not hopeful for Africa. They knew that the pandemic was going to wipe out the population in Africa, and it didn't. Yes, of course, few people died, but it wasn't as many people as what happened in other continents or in other countries. So, big up to African countries for handling the pandemic well.
Donor support for health budgets was already under strain. As African governments, it was time to start getting more serious about financing our health systems out of domestic revenues.
And one other thing about the AU that I wanted to bring up, you will notice that the Sahel region was not invited.
They left ECOWAS saying it's influenced by foreign countries. Now, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso have set up their own bloc, calling it the Alliance of Sahel States. But what's behind their new agreement? And what impact will it have on the wider region?
I'm one of the people that is happy about it, but I know that there are so many people that are supporting them that would have wanted the militants to be there wearing their uniform because everybody's a threat to them, walking the halls of the African Union parliamentary whatever building, but they were not invited. And I think the main reason is just because they are not democratically elected people, so the African Union is not recognizing them. I think it's there in their clause that they don't recognize people that are not democratically elected. So this means further isolation for the Sahel region, and I don't even know how they're gonna do their work because they are landlocked countries that they need other countries to operate to get access to the sea. And I really don't know what their intentions are and what the plan is. And you can tell that they are just scrambling for whatever's there. And one thing that is keeping them moving forward right now, I think, is just the propaganda that they're able to get from African content creators in whatever numbers they have. There's so much propaganda that is being propelled about these countries, which paint them as good leaders. And problem there because they're being enabled to continue doing this and ruining their countries even further. But maybe they're fixing it. Only time will tell. But as far as I'm concerned, I think they have been in power long enough for us to recognize the fruits. But the only fruit that we see is that they have left ECOWAS and now they are suspended from the African Union, and they are isolated. And also what we know is that the jihadist groups in those countries are able to mobilize freely because the country have limited resources to organize and tackle this issue. So
an armed rebel group gaining ground in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The rebel militia has captured the largest city in the east and is the major player in a coalition that wants to topple the government.
Man, it's a whole problem, and I think that the DRC conflict will be the will be. It seems like the M23 are gaining grounds, and there's been talks and talks and talks. And one other thing about the African Union and all the other organizations like SADC and like Eastern Bloc, I don't know what they're called. They can talk, these people. They can hold meetings. They can invite everybody in, fly in, spend all the money in those hotels, talk about what we can do, and then nothing happens because the M23 are still gaining ground in DRC. They're still conquering other cities. They're conquering other towns, and it seems like they're just able to even move further. And I think their plan to get to the capital city of DRC is slowly happening. I don't know what the plan for the government of DRC with this, because it seems like they are heavily relying on either SADC and other EU, all those people to come and help. So we'll see how the one plays. But right now, I'm just glad that African presidents or African leaders are waking up to see that, we cannot be dependent on the aid anymore. We cannot use aid fully, because the leaders of these countries are now getting unpredictable. They don't care whether they have a good relationship with you or a bad relationship with you. When it comes to it, they will cut you off in an instant, and you won't have time to prepare. So I think this should be a wake-up call for African leaders to know that, your friends today might not be your friends tomorrow. So yeah, stay woke, African leaders. Stay woke.